Welcome to the Rhonda Grant Show with your host, Rhonda Grant. If you believe that there is more to life than what you see right now, and you want to find out more, listen in as her guests share their journey and their extraordinary experiences. Now, here is your host, Rhonda Grant.
Welcome. I'm so pleased that you have joined us. My name is Rhonda Grant, and you may access all of my podcasts at rhondagrantauthor.com. The gorgeous theme song for the Rhonda Grant Show is Sun on the Water, composed and performed by John Park Wheeler. My guest today is Donna Fitzgerald, who is co-author of Creative Healing Through Transformation, Conversations with My Soul. On Amazon launch day, which was January 26th of this year, Donna's book ranked number 1 in death and grief, number 1 in stress management, and number 4 in self-esteem. Donna is a contributing author of 2 Daring to Share books, 8 Brave Souls Sharing Their Authentic Road Trip, and There to Hear with a chapter on calm by Diana Reyers. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you, Rhonda. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Well, it's so exciting to have you on our show. And you know, Donna, before the pandemic, you and I had a quiet lunch at a local restaurant where we discussed the power of journaling. You talked about the power that journaling gave you while you were your husband's caregiver and voice. I think that a great many people have survived their trials by telling themselves their stories through journaling and how they are surviving it. How has journaling helped you, Donna?
Oh, that's a really good question, Rhonda. Journaling for me has been my my foundation, really, to healing, to a daily self-care routine that I've been practicing for probably since 2001. When I first was introduced to journaling. My husband was in the 3rd year of his diagnosis of ALS. He was diagnosed in 1998. And my therapist at the time, I was struggling, working full-time, raising our family, and being a full-time caregiver, and suggested that I start journaling. So I started journaling 10 minutes a day. And here we are now in 2021, and I journal still every day. And it has truly been what has moved me forward through grief, trauma, change, transition, life-changing.
Life-changing. And for your book that you have just released, Donna, it's just brand new, Creative Healing Through Transformation. The book is really about that, is it?
Yes, it's really a depiction of my journey through healing, and it's got vision boards, journaling, and then I've adapted worksheets from Tana Hemsley, who had created Authentic Leadership Conversations, and I had done these worksheets probably 10 years ago, and they were instrumental in finding myself through journaling and these worksheets because of caregiver burnout and loss of self in caring for someone else. And I also include in the book writings from not journal entries, but writings when I had moved through probably 5 or 6 years past my husband's death, when I could articulate and write the reflections of what we had gone through in that time.
Mm-hmm. And it's such a tender time, and the feelings are just so raw when you were going through, when a loved one is going through what you see them going through, because they actually lose their voice, and during that time as well.
Yes, they lose their voice, and it's difficult for both, because we were both grieving different. He was grieving the loss of his abilities to mobility, speech, swallowing, communication. I was grieving watching him, plus I was grieving the fact that our relationship was changing. I was his spouse, wife, and then caregiver. And then in time, it's hard to separate being a caregiver and being a spouse. And working full time, and then I was grieving, the life that we thought we would have. And it was just, journaling just gave me an outlet so I could write on paper all these emotions that are going through your mind. And I'd never been exposed to anyone that had a terminal illness. I'd never been to a funeral. So here I am, I'm watching my husband disease continue to deteriorate, and I knew that he was going to die, and I didn't have anything to reflect back on it. So it was all new to me. And then raising our children, and then I had to worry, and trying to keep their lives as normal as possible. And thankfully, they didn't crash and burn all at the same time. So I had to be their support as well.
I think it's amazing, Donna, the gift that you've been able to give others with retaining your journals and being able to actually publish a book to help others, because this book is actually a book to help other caregivers, isn't it?
Yes. When COVID happened a year ago, I was like everyone else, sitting here at home and thinking, oh my, what can I do to support others? And over the years, I've always had this need, or this feeling within myself that to be of purpose and service to others. And over the years, I had supported ALS families and hospice to help those going through grief and loss. And then while I was sitting here last April, I had always had this desire to write a book about my journey and what had happened to me and the growth and what I've experienced. And it just, I didn't put pressure on myself. I just had this feeling that I knew it would come at some point. And then in the summer, I had this opportunity. A friend of mine, Diana Reyers, who wrote the Daring to Share book, she was adapting Tana Hemsley's worksheets for her authentic writing guide. And I was out for a 50K cycle the one day. And I always have inspired thoughts when I'm out in nature.
Just a 50K cycle.
Yeah.
Not out for a walk around the block or two.
No.
A 50K. You're working out a lot of stuff in 50K, Donna.
I am, and it
Yes.
it was one of those days that I was cycling, and I thought, oh, well, why can't I adapt those worksheets for caregivers? And and I thought, because I know these worksheets work because I've done them. I did them 10 years ago, and I thought, if I put them in my own words, which is, I don't want it to be wordy, like heavy, and because people that are caregiving don't have a lot of energy.
No, that's right.
So I wanted it to feel simplified and easy to follow, and that you can. This is a book that you don't just pick up and read straight through. This book is going to be a tool a companion to you for the rest of your life, because you can go through the chapters, and when you start doing the conversations of authenticity and self-awareness and values, you learn more about yourself. And then sometimes you just have to, you go through it, and then you're going to have to sit with that a while and journal about it. And it may be, a few weeks, or depending on how well you're progressing through your own healing or grief, and at what stage you start the journey of self-discovery. And so I felt inspired, and I thought, well, I think I'll do this. And I contacted Tana and asked her if, she would mind if I would adapt her worksheets and include some of my writings. And she was right on board, and gave me agreed that would be a great fit. And when I sat down and started writing, it just flowed. And so within, well, that was probably June, and it was published by January.
And who better to put these sheets together and cater them towards what you had not too long ago been through yourself, and you had such a great understanding and insight because you lived through this. Really, that's the best person to be helping somebody else, right?
Yes, and in the worksheets, I tried to, when I was adapting them, I put examples from my own experience within the worksheets. So I thought it makes it more personal, and they can understand from where I was on my journey. And with each writing that I put at the end of each conversation, I tried to pick a writing that related to the conversation that the chapter is about. So I feel like if you don't have to have a facilitated group, you don't have to have like a book club. This book is easy enough to do by yourself in your own home, in your own time.
Yeah, when you want to do it, when you have the time to do it or the energy to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I would imagine that a lot of your writing would really resonate with people who are going through the same type of...
yes. Yeah. I would, they will, one of the top reasons for writing this book too is I don't want anyone to end up with caregiver burnout, which happened to me after 4 years of full-time caregiving. I found myself sitting on the side of a lake with a box of books, and I had lost myself in caregiving. I didn't know who Donna was. I knew all my roles in life. I knew, I was a wife, a mother, caregiver, an employee, ran the household, taxi driver for the kids. But Donna disappeared, and it was the most terrifying place to be. I often think of it, it's like, I was like an M&M. I had the shell, but the center was gone.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people who feel that way, is that they do or can lose themselves because they're doing so much for others, so much for their children. There's always laundry to do when you get home from work, and dinners to make and lunches to make, and one day just goes into the next, and 4 years goes by and you realize that you have got lost along the way.
Yes, and because there's
And
that
how
guilt.
do you get?
There's that guilt piece that's attached to it, right? If I give too much to myself, what will other people think? Or I should be giving to my family, and it's just a.
Well, sometimes when you've been giving to others for so long, maybe that's where the guilt is. But tell us, Donna, how did you get back from there? How did you get back? Like you said, you ended up at a lake with a bunch of books, and it was frightening. It's because you felt like you needed to find yourself again, or find yourself in other people's writing to help you get to who you were.
Yeah, first of all, I started that weekend or that week at the lake. My husband went into on respite at the local rehab hospital for the week. And I did. I had a box of books. I had Dr. Wayne Dyer's books. I just went to the library and grabbed some books. So I started reading those. I wrote to 10 people in my life to ask them, this is how lost I was, ask them to write what they saw, what Donna, who Donna was to them. And I had my siblings and my parents were at this cottage as well. And my mom sent back I had mailed 10 letters, and I had given letters to my siblings and my parents that were at the cottage. And my mom sent the letter back with my sister and said, "What do you want me to say?" So my mom couldn't even tell me who I was. So in that moment, I thought, nobody can tell me. I have to find this out for myself. And I've always had this little, I don't know if it's a spark or it's a piece of me that just made a commitment that day to do whatever I needed to do to find myself. And what I started to do was started journaling, and that was the foundation. That was my voice. I could write it out, and then I had to make very difficult decisions. I had to realize that I was totally burnt out. I could no longer look after my husband at home full time. So he remained at the rehab hospital from Monday to Thursday, and I'd bring him home Friday till Sunday so I could sleep at least 4 nights of the week. And because I had gone 2 years and I hadn't slept through the night because I had to roll him over and hook up his feeding tube. And so those were the changes I had to start to make. And it was terrible, telling your husband that he couldn't come home, and then he was angry. And I would go visit him, and he'd turn his wheelchair around and he wouldn't look at me. But he had to adjust to his reality as well. And so I just continued. It took time because my body needed to rest. I needed to start eating better. I started to exercise. So it all comes down to self-care. I had to.
And you said you were looking for yourself, but what you realized that there was a spark or that there was a light that was still burning inside of you. And that's what makes people make those changes. And even as difficult as they were, you knew at that time that you had to start taking care of yourself, or you wouldn't be any good for anybody.
I didn't even have a choice. Like my inner light just said, you have to do this.
Exactly.
Because I would not have survived. I was burnt out. And I had to be there still for my husband and my children and myself. And yes, it was, there was really no choice for me. It was just this, this commitment I had to make to myself.
And so with your book, with the creative healing through transformation, what message, I mean, you've done a lot of volunteer work. You've helped a lot of people over the years to the point where you've received awards in the work that the volunteer work that you've done, and with ALS, or ALS.
Yes.
And so what message do you have for people that are right now, Donna, going through exactly what you went through back then?
Well, my message is that I want the caregiver to realize that they matter, and that the caregiver isn't really looked at in the care plan for their spouse or loved one that they're looking after. And so this book for me is my gift to them, to have earlier in the process of caregiving, even if they learn the journaling aspect of it, until they get to a place where they have more space and time to do the personal growth through the worksheets. Because we, as caregivers, we have to live on beyond our caregiving. And if we don't look after ourselves, then the healing and the path through grief is hard. And I think it's easier when you know a lot more about yourself, and you have that relationship with your inner soul, your inner light, from doing this work.
And lots of times, the caregiver is invisible. I mean, all of the focus is always on the person who's sick. And sometimes what can happen is the caregiver ends up being sick. And I think that when you journal your experience, it helps your brain and your body deal with the experience that you're going through. And it's a way of letting go, and letting go of the day, like each day, letting go of the day and the experience in order to cope with the next day. Because what happens, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the days just go into days, and you get up and you carry yesterday with you. And if you journal what happened yesterday, it's the way of letting go. And it's the way, it's a cleansing, really, if you have the energy to do it. And sometimes caregivers must make themselves do it so that they can go on. But and more importantly, it helps them make a decision of what actually they can do and what they can't do. And it might, if they're letting go of each day, be able to reach out to somebody and ask for help, and recognize that the person who's ill needs to go to respite, so that they can take that break and have some time to themselves. And I think that a lot of time that we spend a lot of our life worried about what other people think. And I think there's a saying is that, until you're 20, you think that everybody is judging you on what you're doing and how you're saying it, and where you're going and what you're wearing. And by the time you're 30, you're thinking, well, geez, like hardly anybody's, half of those people might be thinking about that of me. And by the time you're 40, you realize nobody's thought about you at all. They've thought about themselves. And, we spend a lot of our time thinking that other people are making judgments on us. And there are people who do that. But most of the time, we are the ones that judge ourselves the harshest. Do you think?
Oh, that's very true. Yes. Yeah. I think part of it is we grow up with this sense of wanting to belong and to be accepted by everyone, and nobody likes confrontation, and
Well, that's because we went to school. I mean, that's what you learn when you go to school,
yeah,
right?
and then
Yeah.
you get into being an adult, and then when health crisis comes into it, it's just your focus is so directed in one direction that you lose sight of the other aspects of your life. So you have different values in your life. Like I have, when I'm at my best balanced self, I've got my self-care, and I've got my volunteering, and I've got my work and my family, and then when I was caregiving, my focus was strictly on caregiving and my family and work. And then so my self-care, the other aspects of my life that kept me balanced was out of balance. And journaling helped me to regain my voice and to realize that I was so out of balance, I needed to make changes.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't take the time to sit and have conversations with ourselves. I grew up looking for the answers outside of myself.
And people do that, though. We look outside of ourselves for the answers, and
but in reality, all the answers are within us.
They are within us, and it takes many years and a great deal of maturity to. I mean, you can tell somebody that, but it takes a maturity to know where that within is. I mean, I remember, Donna, reading books, and it said to go within.
Mm-hmm.
Go within where? Like, where are you going? And is it in your heart? Is it in your gut? It's in your soul.
Yes.
And many people don't have a connection with the soul, or when they do find that connection with their inner being, and a lot of it is practicing being present. When people get in touch with their inner being, that's where they stop looking for outside for acceptance, and they step into who they really are, and step into who they have come here to be. And as tragic of all of that in your life, Donna, do you feel that you were called to do this type of work? I mean, you worked at the hospital for many, many years, and your whole career was at the hospital. But through the caregiving of your husband, Cliff, and then going on that 50-kilometer journey and making a decision, do you almost feel, and how quickly that book came together once that message was dropped to you on that
Mm-hmm.
ride, do you feel that you were called to write this book and to deliver this message and to help the many people who are going through this today?
I believe that this is my sole purpose. I have had this need, and even when I had caregiver burnout and I was trying to find myself, I started volunteering with the ALS Society for 9 years. And because it made sense of the journey I had been on, and I just have this sense of purpose and well-being when I support others. And I can remember times when I was really at my lowest and wondering, oh my gosh, how can I get through this? But I still had that that feeling that there's something more for me.
Yes, I remember you saying that to me.
I'm going through this for a reason. I had to be empty, rebuild my life. So I have the compassion and empathy to support those that are struggling, because I've been there, and I can sit and give them the space to release what they need to release. I don't have all the answers. I'm not, I can't tell them how to live or make the changes, because they need to do that on their own. But I just love supporting others. And that's why this book is so important to me, because it's out in the world and it will support so many more people than I could touch just in my own community.
No, but in your own community, you've gifted many people. I mean, giving people the space to be and giving the people the space to talk. You've given many valuable gifts to many people. You have such a tenderness about you, and I think it's because you've been through what you've been through. And you have the empathy because you know what that feels like, because you've been there, and it's not been a good place to be.
No, and the writing aspect of the reflections in the book. Well, I journal every morning, but I write a reflection every day as well. And I really believe that when I write my reflections, I don't know if you want to call it spirit, the universe.
Sure.
It comes from somewhere else. It just flows. And when I'm in those moments, in the summer, I was out walking a country road with my grandson in the stroller. And I came home and I just wrote, and it just flowed. And it was a tribute to my husband, because I was on a country road, and it reminded me of when our kids were small, and how our children are now have, they're married, and I have a grandson, and how they appreciate and love the country life, which was so important to my husband. So it was just this kind of full circle moment where I realized my children still have their dad within them, even though he's not here. They've chosen to live in the country, and it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful? That's just wonderful. So before we wrap up the show, Donna, I must ask you, what is the extraordinary discovery that you found in your life?
Oh, the extraordinary discovery is that I have a voice.
Yes.
I grew up without a voice until I hit my mid-40s, until I had caregiver burnout. And that was my catalyst to change. That was my catalyst to doing the self-discovery and the work to find myself. And now I was sexually abused by my father, and when I was a child, and this was all awakened as I was caregiving. And so working all through that, I have a voice now. And
well, you have a voice and you have blossomed, Donna. I mean, look at what you've done with not only with the other books that you've been a co-author in, but your own book that you have published. So, I mean, what a triumph for you, and what a special story that you have. And I know that our guests are going to be able to recognize themselves in some or all of what we've talked about today. And I really appreciate that you've been my guest on the show. And And where can people reach you, Donna? Like, if people want to buy this book or take this course, where can they reach you?
They can reach me at Creative Healing 2019 at outlook.com. And the book can be purchased on Amazon. It can be purchased at chapters.indigo.ca online, or in the Chapter store in Kingston, Ontario, or on my own website, donnafitzgerald.ca.
Right,
And
your website, yes.
Yeah, and I'll ship to Canada, like within Canada.
Mm-hmm. And well, that's wonderful. So you also write a blog on that website, do you, Donna?
Oh, yes. So my morning reflections, I've started, I think probably for the past month, I've been putting my morning reflections on my website. And it reflects on how I felt through my grief and my healing journey.
And they're really good blogs too. I've visited it more than once, Donna, and I've also read previous blogs that you have written. And I really encourage people to go to Donna's website, and it's donnafitzgerald.ca. Is it, Donna?
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Yes, and in the right-hand corner there's a blog that you can follow Donna on her journey. She's a really good writer, and the blogs are really interesting. I want to thank you, Donna. Thank you for being one of my extraordinary guests on the Rhonda Grant Show. This is Rhonda Grant with the Rhonda Grant Show, author of Magical Forces Within, Extraordinary Discoveries in an Ordinary Life, inviting you to look for the magical forces within yourself today and every day, just like Donna has. Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rhonda Grant Show with your host, Rhonda Grant. If you would like to find out more information about Rhonda and her upcoming guests and the work that she does, go to her website, rhondagrantauthor.com. That's rhondagrantauthor.com.